حتى يا دكتور الشاشه دي هتبقى مش هو دي محتاج كاميرا هنا هيبقى في كاميرا كمان.
اوكي تمام. في غدا، في استاذه غدا شايفه اللي لابسه نبيتي بره، تعالى كده بص هوريك. لا ده مش غاده، دي مش غاده. في معايا غاده لازم عشان معانا واحد فيرتشوال صح؟
اللي هو
مش معانا واحد، مش do we have someone virtual؟ معانا واحد هيبقى اونلاين.
تمام ماشي. تيمز اوكي موجود، في حد موجود عملنا المداخله وجاهز.
كويس. لو دخلت
بس هتتعرض اول ما تبدا حضرتك تتكلم ولا
طب بس مش هتقدر تحطه على الشاشه هو عشان يبقى شايف وشايفينه؟
لا هيبقى موجود هنا هو والكاميرا جايبه الناس برضو جنبه.
حلو قوي. بس هتظهرها دلوقتي يعني؟
هظهرها لك من اول ما المؤتمر يبدا.
ما احنا اهو 11:30.
ابدا لك.
ماشي يلا
ماشي. وده اللي هيظهر لو في ستريم يوتيوب. تمام
اوكي
هيبقى هنا هيبقى الشاشه دي. تمام.
Yeah, she's here.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought I should introduce Mattia from the 10.
Hello. I think we met before.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely. Yes. Nice to see you. Thanks for the open space for salmon.
Yes, thank you for helping us to
No, please. No, I'm gonna be like trying to do my best to send America.
Yes, sure. Okay. Definitely you will
so
do it.
I have to be here or you're gonna call us?
No. Everyone will be here.
But you're going to call us here? No,
we don't have this protocol. Sit, yes.
Okay. Perfect. Fine.
بس يلا نشوف مين تاني معانا. نطلع يوكو.
هنطلع ريسا كل الفانلز يطلعوا.
طلعيهم كلهم يلا.
Colleagues and
We have many Arabs and also some from Asia and from Africa. Good morning. Hello. Good morning. Okay. Yeah. كده أحسن.
تيست.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning. Welcome to everyone here. I'm glad to open this side event discussing one of the very important and very crucial topics that we are dealing with. The title of the side event is Enhancing Locally Led Resilience to Reduce Impacts of the Climate Change. From my point of view, everything the negotiators discussing in the rooms on the other side of this place, at the end of the day, the results will never appear unless we have resilient communities at the very local level. This is where we can see our farmers, our Bedouins, our fishermen, our vulnerable communities are able to survive and to have sustainable livelihoods, and they have a better life. This is why the organizers of this event, the Norwegian Refugee Council and the Refugees International RI, with the coordination with RAED, the Arab Network for Environment and Development, and also the GF Small Grants Program, and I'm very happy to have all of the organizers, almost all of the organizers are here, and also the collaborators. Our objectives for this session will be to highlight locally driven efforts and experiences in this region, in the Arab and Africa region. As you know, Egypt is hosting this COP on behalf of Africa, strengthening community resilience and better DRR governance, disaster risk reduction governance, discuss available national and international opportunities and future mechanisms for climate finance. Because we are trying to cover everything from knowledge, capacity, to finance as well, with, of course, exchange of experiences between the different communities. Within this also, side events, we would like to showcase locally led solutions and determine challenges that are facing, and also opportunities and financial wide collaboration that enables globalized, locally led climate adaptation. As you know, adaptation has been always the challenge that Egypt and also the Arab states are talking about in Africa. Yes, mitigation is a challenge that we have been working on for so many years, but the adaptation needs to be taken the right positioning that we want to see out of Sharm el-Sheikh, of course, in addition to the loss and damage and all these things. But anyway, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Nina Birkeland. Nina Birkeland from the Norwegian Refugee Council, NRC, as I said, the lead organization for organizing this sad event. Nina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Emad. And first of all, welcome to all participants. It's great to see.
It's on. Be closer. Yes.
Okay, I'll almost eat it. So first of all, thank you so much, Emad and RAED. I think, yes, you see on the papers, it's NRC, the Norwegian Refugee Councils, and Refugee International. We are the formal organizers, but the real organizers are RAED. And we have had a collaboration for many years with RAED on human mobility, climate change. And I'm very happy that now at COP in Egypt, we can work together on this side event. I will say a few words of welcome from us as NRC. And as we have seen this year, it's become very, very clear that we can't any longer talk about climate change without also talking about displacement. And we saw it very much in the last assessment report from the IPCC. I will have a colleague presenting some work from Somalia a little bit later, but I also wanted to highlight very much a piece of work we've been doing with local farming communities in Iraq, where we have seen that drought has worsened the situation for farmers during the last few years. And it's very much documented that the impact of the Iraq's water and climate crisis on farmers and displacement affected people means that people are much more vulnerable. And we have tried to work with families in the drought hotspots to see how this is impacting them. And we have seen that over the last years, it's resulted in a loss of crops and incomes. And 4 out of 10 farmers said they have harvested less wheat, barley, fruit and vegetables this year than they had done last year. And a quarter of the households, they had less, of 90% less wheat in this season. So again, looking at this, we need to have access to climate adaptation funding for local communities, local farmers, to be able to prevent future displacement. We also see very much that in countries where you have conflict and climate change coming together, you get the least climate funding. So I'm also very happy that we have colleagues from GIF here today, because we really hope that in the way that the Green Climate Fund can work, you can have more funding actually reach the most vulnerable. I will stop in 1 minute, and again, just thank you so much for RAED organizing this, and I think it's fantastic that we're finally able to speak from the local perspective and not too much from us sitting in head offices around the world. Thank you. Back to Emad.
Thank you very much, Nina, for your introductory remarks, and also for highlighting the importance of and also the challenge that we are facing and the magnitude of the problem, because sometimes we think that life is easy, but actually people who are suffering a lot. And this is maybe the point that I will give the floor to, is it? Do we have anyone? Okay. So this is why we have also Yoko Watanabe here, the global manager of the Small Grants Program. Yoko has been in the GF process for so many years, but we were lucky to get her to be the global manager of the Small Grants Program. And I'm the national coordinator. For many of you who knows that I'm the national coordinator of the Small Grants Program in Egypt for so many years. This is where people always ask where Emad gets his salary. This is where I get my salary from, is the Small Grants Program. And you know, anything else I do as a volunteer. So anyway, I'm very proud that we managed to get Yoko in the middle of the 100 things that she has to do today. So we have from her team Yoko and Risa. So Yoko will give us the opening remarks, and maybe to respond to what Nina said about the support that could come also for some of these initiatives, which is already going on. So Yoko, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thanks for that introduction, Emad. It's an honor to be here with so many colleagues and friends and partners here today, and thank you very much for the Norwegian Refugee Council for inviting the Small Grants Program as a partner and having this really important event on the local-led resilience. Because it's really important. A whole week I have been really emphasizing that for urgent climate action, we really need local action to be further enhanced and supported. All these initiatives on the ground really requires ownership and solutions from the local community. And the resilience is one of the most important things we believe that needs to be done both socially and environmentally to move forward this crisis on climate and other environmental issues. So as Emad mentioned, we are actually celebrating the 30th anniversary of Small Grants Program this year. We have a coverage of 128 countries, and climate change adaptation is one of our key focus. And of course, SGP Egypt has been a key core country who have been working from the very beginning with Emad's leadership here. And we also have amazing program here on adaptation. I have this week had a pleasure of interacting with women's farmers who's been working on quinoa and millet production and have been developing amazing, delicious bakery stuff. Yes, I know. I saw her, so that's why I'm mentioning. And thank you very much. And I think these are really key example of what we can do with local communities and make a difference on food security, women's empowerment, social development, and lead to social, of course, the sustainable development goals. So I just want to really emphasize that we are really looking forward to working further. Risa here is our community-based adaptation specialist in my team. She will be talking more about this, but we have recently got into a phase 4 of community-based adaptation initiative with the government of Australia. And we are really looking forward to expanding these work, and also not among the co-financing we receive, but with the GF financing that we are going into with GF8. We have an opportunity to amplify these work on ecosystem-based adaptation and many more work. So really looking forward to working in Egypt and Arab states and beyond to work further and partner with all of you. So thank you very much again. And I have to leave a little early, but thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Yoko. Yes, I know, and I invite all of you to go to the website of the Small Grants Program, and you see how much impact this program has been doing in all the countries everywhere in the world. And I see also one of your colleagues, ex-colleagues, Ala Sarhan. Of course, you were working together. Yes, please, and we have to learn from each other. This is the very good thing about the Small Grants Program, that the experience exchange that we have among the different countries, among the different regions, is making also the program more successful, and we are always proud of what we hear from people about the impact that the Small Grants Program is doing. Thank you, Yoko, for that. And now, let's go to our second part, the panel, and I will invite, I start with Perrine Piton, the Chief of Party, the BRCiS, from the Norwegian Refugee Council as well, but she is in charge of the Resilience Project in Somalia. Perrine, she will be with us online. Are you going to? Yes, it's here. Please go ahead. Perrine, are you there? Can you hear us? Can you unmute yourself, please?
It's unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yes, great. Go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you to RAED and of course to my colleagues in NRC. I'm Perrine. I'm speaking from Mogadishu, Somalia, and I'm really excited to be able to give you some update and maybe some insight about what we're going through in this country that very dearly needs more assistance and support with adaptation to climate change. So I have a presentation. So if we can, I'm not sure if it's being seen on the screens yet. Can you see the presentation?
The presentation will be on this side.
Okay. Can't see the slides myself.
I think we can see it. I think we can see it. Can you just try to change the slide, and then we can tell you if it's working?
It's
yes,
being
yes,
changed
we
by
can
my
see
colleague.
it. So this the slide is on this side, and her photo is here. So please look at that side. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So we can go to the next slide. Just want to bring a little focus on what Somalia is going through at the moment, and I think that many of you have heard about the long-lasting crisis in the country, but more recently, we are going through a very severe drought. So at the moment we're in the fifth failed rainy season. So that means 2.5 years without proper rains, and the country is ranked at the second most vulnerable country to climate change. At this point in time, and the latest updates from October are that nearly 3 million people are internally displaced, and as much as 1 million people have displaced only between the beginning of this year and November. So the numbers are huge. And in spite of the intensity of the crisis and the near famine conditions in many areas of the country, the mobilization and the response is lagging behind and is really late. The very sad thing about this, of course, is about the loss of lives and also the impact on the economy and the irreversible damage that we are observing on a monthly basis since the beginning of this drought. But it's also that there is a sense of hopelessness when across the international community, but also across the Somalis themselves. A lot of people are feeling discouraged by this continuous cycle of droughts, but also flooding. We also have recurrent floodings in Somalia. And I think the very sad thing about this is that it feels like this hopelessness doesn't need to be, actually. And if the country was actually benefiting from climate adaptation funding in the way that it actually is needed, this sense of hopelessness wouldn't be that intense, and actually even the impact of the drought wouldn't be that bad. And that's why I want to share some insights from our own programming as BRCiS. So BRCiS is a consortium. We can go to the next slide, Nina. I can't see the slides, so I hope that you can see properly. I can only see them on my laptop, but I'm not seeing what you see in the room. So BRCiS it stands for Building Resilient Communities in Somalia, and it was actually created in 2013 in the aftermath of the last large famine that Somalia went through in 2011 as a famine prevention mechanism. It's a community-led climate resilience approach that we're implementing in the country with a system length, which means that we focus on communities, but we also try to see the impacts of shocks and risks with an area lens, and we try to involve local governments and municipalities as well as the private sector in our programming. We work in all federal member states of Somalia. We've delivered more than 260 million worth of projects since we started working. As a platform, we organize capacities. We try to maximize accountability to local stakeholders, but mostly we want to promote change in the way that humanitarian development actors are having an impact in Somalia. We have 9 members in our platform, plus 13 national members. In terms of our approach, our starting point is that we try to engage at area level, and we engage with communities around action planning, and we look at the state of their ecosystems, their environmental challenges, and how risks such as flooding and drought are affecting them. And then we design plans together, and these plans, they include both a contingency component that really looks at anticipatory action, early response, and then also long-term adaptation that are going to focus more on sustainable water management, on ecosystem rehabilitation, and long-term goals. And then we link this up to the market systems, because as much as we want to engage people on adapting and rehabilitating their ecosystems and their natural capital, we also want to make sure that they have sustainable and resilient livelihood, because at the end of the day, the poverty is really intense in Somalia, and there is so much needs in terms of strengthening the income base and having an income base that is resilient. It's very, very important to link that to that livelihood work. So next, I'm going to highlight some of the impact that we are seeing now within the drought period. So as much as Somalia is going through a very, very huge humanitarian crisis, and I don't think that it's easy to imagine from abroad how bad it is at the moment. But in communities that we've supported with resilience programming in the past 4 or 5 years, there is a significant difference. And that's why I was highlighting the fact that this hopelessness doesn't have to be, because we do have solutions, and I'm sure that you all know as practitioners that there are things that can be done, not only to mitigate, but really to adapt to the climate change and even to regenerate the ecosystem so that they're able to absorb shocks and so that communities are able to absorb shocks. So if you're on slide 5, that's great. So we have a very intense component of community engagement, and that's not because we only want accountability in our programming. That's because we want community leadership, and we want that leadership because that's actually a resilience capacity. Leadership, empowerment is a resilience capacity that people carry with them in their capacity to organize their communities, in their capacities to relate to their government, in their capacity to deal with shocks. So one of the positive change that we've seen is that at baseline, nearly a quarter of our community members had no one to turn to for help. And in addition to that, they were unwilling to help others. So they were saying that in case of shock or crisis, they would not go out of their way to help other people. Only after 2 years of programming, these numbers had declined by half. So people, for each of the indicator, you had a 50% improvement. In addition to this, and we focus a lot on women empowerment because we know that women in their community are very important agents of change and resilience. And in this case, women's voices and social capital also had tremendously improved, and in some cases reaching the same levels as men. And this is in a society that everyone calls very patriarchal and where women are struggling to have a voice. So this is specifically a graph on bonding social capital, and you can see that we have our control group that is in blue and our key focus group that is in pink, and the dotted line is women and the straight line is men. And you can see that within these 2 years, women bonding social capital has increased nearly to the same level as men, which means that they feel that they have the capacity to influence their leadership. And that's a huge gain. And that's also something that people take with them during a situation like this one, like the droughts. It means that people have these resilience capacities that they can carry during displacement, they can use to cope with shocks. A very important area of focus in Somalia, and I think in many of the contexts that we deal with, is of course the sustainable management of water. And this is very important, of course, within the drought context and also within the flooding context, which really in Somalia is extremely cyclical. We've done a lot of work to find the right infrastructure and the right way to manage and maintain infrastructure in these various contexts across the country. And after 3 failed rainy seasons, so that's during spring this year, 84% of our infrastructure were still operational and in use, and therefore providing water for human consumption and livelihood. So that's also a very important pillar of resilience, and the fact that these infrastructure are developed and maintained with community and local service providers is really making a difference in terms of how they're maintained in the long term, and they continue to provide water even when there is a huge water scarcity situation. We also work a lot around community DRR, disaster risk reduction, early warning systems, and through the systems that we've set up, we've seen that at the beginning of the drought in September last year, communities in one of our areas of intervention utilized the information that they were collecting through the early warning system to fundraise for themselves. So alongside the project interventions, they started mobilizing their own communities. They created drought committees. They created a drought fund that they were managing themselves, and they fundraised up to $185,000 to supply water to their livestock and to their communities. So that's just an example of how this community leadership and empowerment yields results outside of the scope of the project. And there's really that element there of replicability and scalability that we're looking for, because as much as funding is needed, it needs to be funding that has this pollination function and that can grow, because there will never be enough funding for each and every need. So we need to find solutions that are collectively carried by the communities. And finally, one last impact in terms of preventing displacement. So displacement in Somalia is very much a coping strategy. And sometimes it happens in conditions that are quite positive, and sometimes it happens in conditions that are a disaster and create a lot of morbidity and mortality. So in April 2022, among the drought-impacted rural villages that we surveyed, we could see that the villages were hosting a lot more people than the people that had left them. So they were hosting 70 households on average for each village, and then and some villages were hosting as many as 230 families. So this is also a sign of resilience. When you can host people, you can welcome people, you can support people, and you don't have to move and to go and join the IDP settlements. So this is for sort of the key impacts. I think that some of the lessons we've learned, and we are on slide 10 now, Nina. We think that in Somalia, a large part of the investment should be to close the agency gap. So there's a lack of access to information about climate risk, what enhances them, what mitigates them, and there's a real need to localize that to the specific context and strengthen the leadership of community and local stakeholders. If you go to slide 11, once we've closed this agency gap, there's a need to pilot and try adaptations and really empower communities and local systems to pilot their adaptations, and then really go through that process of comparing, measuring, and validating what works, so that then, and that's slide 12, we can potentially go to scale with these adaptations. And this is a process that has not happened yet in Somalia, where in spite of the country's situation and very prominent state in terms of climate adaptation funding, the country is getting very, very little funding for climate adaptation, and therefore has not been able to go through this process of really, really understanding what are the adaptations that are relevant to each and every context. Yes, thank you so much. I will stop there. You can go to slide 13, which says Mahad Sanid, everyone, and that's how we say thank you in Somalia. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Perrine, for this comprehensive presentation. I think we have learned a lot from your presentation. Somalia is one of the very difficult cases, and you managed to have, at least at the end, a process that led to minimize the victims of the climate and to also help majority to be resilient. I like very much the idea that you are working on different levels at the same time, especially the one that is dealing with the gender. I'm happy to hear that the women and the men are at the same level of the decision-making process in this, in your project and your. I think this is a good example that we can learn from. And having said that, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Mete Rodriguez Blandon. From the stakeholder engagement mechanism. I just want to remind you that discussing the challenges and also highlight and showcase some examples and highlight opportunities for financial-wide collaboration that enables locally led adaptation. Please,
Thank
you have
you.
the floor.
Thank you very much. Just to start, to ask who is or who are in the room right now. Can you please raise your hand if you are representing NGOs or foundations? Okay. National governments or local governments? Okay. Academia? Private sector? Okay. And who are representing community groups and grassroots organizations here? Okay. So as we can see, community groups are always the less representative in the rooms and in the discussions. And we need to really switch off about what we want to do in the process of enhancing locally led resilience. Because I'm here representing local communities and the wider commission, and we are members of the stakeholders engagement mechanism of the UNDRR agency. And we were creating this mechanism and we were creating this local communities group because when we were attending the global platforms for disaster risk reduction, we always were talking about affected communities, for example, with tsunamis in Southeast Asia, and there were no representatives from the communities. So in that case, we were speaking and we went through the secretary of the UNDRR in that moment, Margareta Wallström, and we were defining to create a new structure, the Community Practitioners Platform for Resilience. And these platforms are right now operating in almost 43 countries, in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And we were discovering and we were thinking about, okay, if we want to really work on a locally led resilience, we need to really adapt on what we are going to do and what communities needs to strengthen. For example, communities are doing the community mapping process to understand about hazards and about vulnerabilities. That in that sense, we can create the sense of the risk. And we can bring these maps, not only map as a simple map at croquis. We can bring the map to do an advocacy process with the local authorities and with the national disaster management agencies as well. So we have been also working on developing food systems. And I want to say that during the COVID crisis that we had 2 years ago, our groups, our communities were supplying food and vegetables to the communities that were in the lockdown. So that means that if we are working in resilience, we need to work in anticipating in the anticipatory model of the processes, no? And we are working on that. Talking about water harvesting or water systems in the community. During the very worst drought in India in 2015, the leaders of the Swayam Shishkin Project, SSP in India, they were implementing a very innovative model for water capture, you know, and they were doing those, using some traditional and ancestral knowledge to irrigate the camps, and they were like starting to do different innovations. The same with the seeds bank. Seeds banks were awarded by the Equatorial Prize when the Hurricane Mitch was hitting Honduras. And this was something that they were creating and developing, and right now is a very important area of the resilience for different groups, as well as the tools bank. When the disaster is coming and everything is flooded and then the water is going, we need tools to clean the community. We need tools to start rebuilding communities and agricultural process. So we don't have to work every single resilience practice as you know, separated or isolated. We are also trying to implement different models or mechanisms that are operating in the same way in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. We call the diamond of resilience. And this diamond of resilience is our theory of action, and it's also like our theory of change, put it in a place that is really operating at the local systems. So we also see that if we are operating without doing any effort for strengthening women's leadership, this is the key. This is the real key in the communities. Strengthening women's leadership, because women are really building systems that link culture, climate, and DRR. And these are the ones that we really need to push forward. We also need to see that we are talking about local implementation, but we need resources to do that. Otherwise, really, it's going to be talking and talking and talking everywhere, and we are not really going to be operationalized or doing something concrete. WIDO Commission has been developing the Community Resilience Fund. That is a mechanism operating right now in 34 countries, all over the 3 regions. We are working, distributing some of the resources in grassroots women's hands to operate different capacity building processes and to let them to conduct and design the intervention. We are from outside. Communities need to do something very concrete and at the very grassroots level. The implementation of these resilience practices to do the locally led adaptation or to do all these locally led resilience needs to be also managed by the local authorities and the local governments. In that sense, we are trying to create very solid and strong relationships and partnerships among grassroots women organizations at the very local level with the local authorities, because local authorities has budget and has the mandate of the Sendai framework. So in that sense, we need to push forward on that idea of having everything on place. And we also need to design or to build new policies. The policy framework in our countries is completely isolated of the reality of the communities. So in that sense, we are working very strongly with the disaster management agencies in some of the Latin American countries. We have separated the Center for the Disaster and Prevention in Central America with 7 countries. We are linked and we are partnering with this institution, as we also are partnered with SARC in Asia. So in that sense, I think women and the locally led processes has not to be allowed alone or isolated of the very important places where the debate is taking place. We need to be doing, okay, we allocate resources, strengthening women's participation, leadership, empowerment, so on, but with very concrete practices on the ground, on the grassroots level. And then strengthening organizations and women's network to do advocacy. Advocate at the local, national, regional, and global level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maite? Maite, okay. Thank you very much. You are, again, confirming what we heard also from Perrine about the role of the local communities and how they are able to give us the example and also the solution that could be replicated and could be even extended not only at the same country but in other different countries. And I'm always happy to hear the role of women getting into the core of this, because and you can see also on the panel that the majority are from women here speaking, because they have the knowledge and they have also the experience. Now our coming presenter will be Ms. Risa Edu. Risa will give us more in-depth information and also examples coming from the Small Grants Program. Risa is part of the team of Yoko. Yoko had to leave us because she has another commitment, but we are very happy to hear from Risa and from a global program that's working in the region, in the Arab and Africa region. Please, you have the floor.
Hi everyone, thanks Emad, and it's really a pleasure to be on this panel today, and I really want to thank Maite as well as Perrine for what they shared, because it's very, very complementary to what we are doing at the Small Grants Program. So since 2009, the Small Grants Program has partnered with the Government of Australia, and we have been implementing the Community-Based Adaptation Program in 41 countries, including 37 SIDS. Now, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, adaptation was not really a subject that was being discussed at the local level. Now, locally led adaptation seems to be a very trendy topic. But at that time, in 2009, this is something that was really, really innovative that we were taking to the community. Mitigation was still getting a lot of the limelight, but at that time, local communities were experiencing the impact of climate change as they are doing now. And we were able to take this program to some of the most vulnerable countries around the world, specifically small island developing states, to raise awareness on this issue, but more importantly, to provide financial and technical support at the community level. So community members themselves could actually develop projects that were locally adapted, locally relevant, and engaging a wide range of stakeholders. So since 2009, we have implemented this program, and we have benefited over 250 community members. Projects have focused on land degradation, coastal erosion, what else? Coastal zone management and climate smart agriculture. So those were the main thematic areas of our projects. But more importantly than that, all of our projects have had a very strong social inclusion element. So when we talk about vulnerability and climate change, we tend to talk about local communities as one unified group. We in the development context, we talk about them as one homogeneous group. But in reality, on the ground, the community is made up of so many different people, and each person has a unique experience and a unique vulnerability. So what Mighty was talking about in terms of women empowerment is so very important in terms of the climate change adaptation discussion, because women, youth, and girls often experience intersectional vulnerability. They're not just vulnerable to climate change as a human, but they're vulnerable because they're women and girls. And they face different vulnerabilities to men in the community. And this is why it's so very important through these adaptation and locally led projects to engage the different aspects of the community. In the same way, youth are also vulnerable in a different way to other members of the community. And similarly, persons with disabilities who are even more vulnerable and do not have a voice when we talk about national or even local adaptation strategies. So it's very, very important when we are discussing and designing locally led programs to think of the community not as one group, but as a diverse group of individuals. And how do we design our strategies that address each of these vulnerabilities? And this is why it's so very important to have community groups and representatives of different persons in the community present at the discussion and development of projects and initiatives. And not just in the design, but also throughout implementation and even after the project ends. The point of these funding programs is not just to provide money and then leave after a few years. It's to ensure that the initiatives are sustainable and the impacts last long after this money has been used. And that's why it's important to build capacity, as our previous speakers were also mentioning. And it's important to also connect local communities to local authorities as well as national authorities and agencies. It doesn't make any sense if we have a project that's implemented in a one remote community and that's it, and the national government or local authorities are not aware of it. It's not going to be sustainable. The impacts are not going to last. So we need to ensure that there are synergies between what's happening at the local level and what's happening at the national level. And through the Small Grants Program, we have these opportunities. We provide these opportunities for dialogues and discussion between civil society, academia, technical experts in the field, national government counterparts. It's important that we connect the dots, and this is really a problem everywhere, and especially when we talk about locally led adaptation. It needs to be locally led, but it also needs to be connected to what's happening at the national level with national adaptation strategies and plans. It needs to be financed at the national level as well. So while international funding and donor organizations can provide that seed funding and that spark to start something at the community level, we really need it to be sustained at the national level. And I just want to give 2 short examples from our community-based adaptation program. One in the Seychelles, a small island off of Africa, an African small island developing state. One of the small islands in Seychelles is called Perrine. And in Perrine, they have a very unique ecosystem, very diverse and with many endemic species of plants and animals. And over the last 10 years, what has been happening is because of the increasing temperature, the island has been impacted by severe drought. And this severe drought has increased the occurrence of forest fires on this ecosystem. Now, this ecosystem is not just important as a habitat for various animal species, but it's the watershed on this island, this very small island. And if this watershed is burning and if the land is being degraded, it means that the farmers downstream are not able to grow their crops and feed the island, feed their people. So our project focused on really assessing what was going on in that watershed, developing a management plan and management strategy, testing the soil to see what was happening with the soil, what was the impact of the fire on the soil. And we engaged a variety of technical institutions, academia, and the national government in developing this plan and strategy, but it was actually led by the local community. So this plan was developed by the local community. They were able to get resources from the Small Grants Program as well as other government agencies, and they were able to set up a nursery and they started rehabilitating the land. Now over 3 hectares of land have been rehabilitated, and segments of the watershed that had previously been burnt are now intact and flourishing again, which has enabled the local farmers downstream to increase their productivity in terms of the crops and fruits and vegetables that they're selling. This initiative has been so successful that the national government has now scaled this up to some other islands across Seychelles, and they have been able to get support from UNDP as well as the United Nations Environment Program, and they have been able to secure additional funding to scale this up. So I just wanted to show you that with a small community project, once you have the engagement of key stakeholders, you can make a difference and you can scale this up to a national level to something that is aligned with adaptation strategies, aligned with adaptation plans, and sustainable over the long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Risa, for this very also comprehensive presentation. I personally, of course, have my own love to the Small Grants Program and what the program is doing, but of course the example you gave from Seychelles is a very good one, and it shows how we are trying to make the 2 ways, the bottom-up approach from the experience that we develop at the local level, and then top-down, because in this case we need the support from central governments and to support the idea not only at the same place of the community but also to replicate it in other areas. So this was a very good example. Now we'll go a little bit and fly in Africa to the northwest part of Africa, to Algeria, and we will hear from my brother, engineer Abderrazak Messaad from Association for Environmental, Natural and Urban Protection in Algeria. A case study from Algeria. Please, you have the floor, my brother. Go ahead. I know that English is difficult for Algeria, but we are ready to have your Anglo-Arab, Franco-Arab, whatever. Go ahead. I hope the mic is going well.
Yes.
It has to be green.
Yes. Thank you very much, my
Okay.
brother. Yes, of course, North Africa is not very English. So I try to explain to you our experience during 5 years. by NGOs and private sector. So I will take 5 minutes because my English is not very well. So the purpose is how to make nomads more resilient in North Africa. This fringe of society until the 80s was the majority of population in North Africa. So the climate change and the economic change make this fringe have difficult lives. So the region is the highlands in North Algeria, near Messaad, this steppe town located in the southwest of the Hodna region, and the highlands of central Algeria. Presented in its surroundings village into the 80s, the sober landscapes still made by mobile dwellings, the tents, or BRCiS, a shelter that was perfectly adapted to the living conditions of these nomads, as well as the hostility of the natural environment and the climatic changes. As soon as Algeria became independent, the state worked to liquidate all its tribal, patriarchal, and semi-feudal structures. The state proceeded to a radical transformation of the peasantry as well as the dilution of nomadism by structuring new social relationships through the organization of the production and the reorganization of the housing unit, which led to a progressive sedentarization of these nomads by the adopting of a fixed habitat, the state rural house. However, this type of dwelling proposed by the state did not suit the social, physical, and cultural needs of these newly settler travelers, which led many of them to taunt this form of imposed special domesticity. Through this exposition, we will expose the special typomorphological and construction principles of a new form of vernacularized habitat, with a cultural anchorage, which tries to adapt to the climate change and to help the inhabitants not to leave their regions. That the architectural study office, our architectural study office proposed to this social fringe, and which knew an approval and adoption by a great number of them. So, under the guise of modernity, the state proposed this form of habitat, the state habitat. So, some of their former nomads lives in this form of habitat. Through this domestic architecture design, the state's technical service seems to give the upper hand to typological appearance to the detriment of the social, physical, and cultural needs. 60% of completed and newly built rural dwellings are not used now. Taking advantage of this financial aid of state, financial aid and formula, the design office, our design office wanted to following the anthropological survey development with these former nomads of Messaad, to propose a new architectural design that meets the needs of this fringe of society. by integrating the concept of vernacular habitat of BRCiS. Our experience began with this old woman. The idea come from our trip during a visit to the locality of Lid Sliman. They had met lonely old women who lived in a precarious shelter, vaguely resembling her former BRCiS. A circular enclosure raised by 3 bricks of a height of about 60 centimeters, acting as poles, on which were suspended pieces of fabric as a cover. The clothes reached the ground and were fixed by large stones surrounding the shelter. This is the region adopting to our idea is how to adapt the container to the content. This is our idea. Our group had tried to enlarge and adapt architecturally the plan of the old initially intended for the habitat of a single person to the whole community of the ex-nomads or further nomads according to the consistency of each family and its needs in terms of spaces. The first test involved an average family living in the commune of Sidi Amer, a commune located on a rugged site in Zimbra mountain of Ouled Nail. The first trial involved a financially deprived family living in a precarious shelter made of reeds covered by tarpaulin and rolls of polyene plastics film. This is the basic architectural plan of the vernacular house. The typology is like the tents of BRCiS. There is an open space. There is no separation between the spaces. It's an open space like tents. This is the self-building with which is taken by habitants. Some of habitants was living in this kind of houses. The only modifications are respectively the nesting of the house is in a circular enclosure all around the house, serving as stable, and the realizations of the general invert for the foundations. This is how the stages of our works. Of course, we are talking about the cultural anchorage on this region to make this habitat not to leave their regions. This is the plan and the facade of the vernacular house, and the result is to have some houses like this house. This is the outside of the house, and this is the inside of the house. In conclusion, nomadism as a way of life has known. Since the French colonization, destruction, and destabilization, the modernist vision of the Algerian state considered the nomad as being in mutation called, sooner or later, to settle down and leave this state of instability, inadequacy with the national political desire to make modern citizen. It is in this aim that the formula of the rural habitat made its appearance in the policy of housing in Algeria, by offering to the rural and nomadic populations standard plans of houses, and this in spite of the diversity of the geographical, social, and cultural situation of the grounds of its future houses. This had led this fringe of population to refuse and abandon this imposed domestic habitat. In order to help these former nomads in their sedentary journey, we designed that our design is inspired by the spatial and typological tributes of the BRCiS tents, thus wanting to get closer to the vernacular habitat of its populations. The proposed alcove house presents specific typomorphological qualities stemming from the cultural background of these travelers, as well as an energetic and environmental optimization, taking into account the integration in the reception site and realized at a reasonable cost price. Qualities that make it adopted and appropriated by this population. And thank you very much.
Shukran, merci. Thank you very much, Mr. Abderrazak, for this wonderful example also from Algeria. It's a real good model. I think if we had some private sector here, they could have developed of this idea some nice, locations in different places. It's of course adaptive, local-led adaptive measures. If these people they did not have this project, definitely they will have to go to somewhere else, and then a problem will be arising and getting bigger and bigger. So thank you very much for what you have presented to us, and I have to congratulate you for your language adaptive measures as well. You have done very good English, so thank you. Now, last but not least, Ms. Sadia, Engineer Sadia Salhi. She is the head of Together, Jam'iyat Man, Together Association to Protect Human and the Environment from Iraq. Sadia will give us another example from Iraq, and then we will have the time for the discussion, questions, comments from the floor. Dr. Sadia, Engineer Sadia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for RAED for inviting me to attend this important event. Actually, I'm coming from Iraq, and you know Iraq is the first country of civilization, the first country of the first letters appeared to the world, and the first law also appeared to the world. This civilization was established on the two important rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. And now Tigris, Euphrates, they are dried, and they are suffering a lot. And it was there's a prediction that in 2040 it was totally dried. So Iraq reported as one of the most 5 countries affected by the climate change. Now the drought, the sandstorms, which is like 202 days per year, most of Iraqi governorates suffer from sandstorm. Actually, this was put a lot of pressure on the government and on the civil society to work to adapt and mitigate the effects of climate change. As we are aware of that since years, not now, we started as organizations since 2006 to focus on education. because we thought that education is the core and the important sector to focus on in order to have generations of young people and decision makers to work toward climate change and environmental protection. Unfortunately, Iraq is unstable since years, since 1980, where there's a lot of wars with the neighbors and with the other countries, and this instability cause of neglect the environmental sector in Iraq. But after 2003, there's an opportunity for the civil society to start working on initiatives and on local community to build their resilience and to aware them about their important role in working in environmental sector. As organizations, unfortunately, also there's less opportunities for them from the international organization to support them in training or also in funding environmental initiatives. So they start depend on themselves to work on very small initiatives and on local base. As we believe in the role of civil society, we started to work on women also and to engage women on initiatives. For example, we have initiatives to empower rural women to start using dripping system because of lack and shortage of water in west of Iraq. Those women are affected by ISIS. They burn all their farms and they lost everything. And as well as those effects, also climate change put a lot of pressure on them, and they started to lose their agriculture and their skills in agriculture. So we started to empower them to build their capacities in agriculture, on organic agriculture, and also using dripping system in their agriculture, and they started to work on that and using the organic agriculture. Also, another women who left these places in the rural areas, we started to build their capacities in making environmentally products. For example, for the eco bags, and this will serve in combating climate change, providing economic source for the women, and also environmentally friendly, and educate people to use those eco bags. One of our initiatives also to build a sample of biogas in the rural areas in order to have to educate the rural people to use the products of the animals in producing their own electricity and their own also fertilizer from their animals. Empowering young people. We believe in young people. They can play a major role in combating climate change. So we train a lot of young people to start working on planting activities. And there's an initiative to plant more than 1 million trees in all over Iraq. It was a voluntary-led initiatives done by young people who will make a change in the community. And it was actually an initiative for others to start the same initiatives in other places of Iraq. For the education, we have a project, it's funded a project to start work on sustainability in education and how to train teachers to start implement small projects in the schools, and to educate and engage families and young people and the kids in implementing small activities in the schools to educate them and to open their mind about their role in combating climate change. Regarding the partnership, we started also to build partnership with the government, because we thought that without the government role, still initiatives can be expanded across the nation. So we work closely with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Water Resources in order to have a big project and to be a mandatory programs for the schools in all over Iraq. Another initiative also that was done by our organization, it was a platform, online platform. We just started this platform. And it was in the design process to have like a monitoring program through the volunteers from all over the world to put their environmental violations on the interactive map and link this map and this platform to the decision makers in order to take actions as soon as there's any like violations or any affected areas, they can interact directly without delay. Thank you very much.
I liked very much the way, Saadiyya, you put it, that, you know, with the oldest civilized country, and then the challenges that you are facing that really make everyone sad about what happened in Iraq in the last years. But I'm sure with the commitment and the enthusiasm and also the power of the people that you are representing, things will be different in Iraq. I'm happy to see that your initiatives is also building on the young people, youth, women. Partnership and dialogue will remain the main and the important solution for anything we have. I know we heard from Somalia and from Iraq, countries that are facing you know, very difficult stability issues, but at least we still can present some good examples and some good showcases that can tell that you know, there are many who are very much keen to continue and deal with the challenges. Anyway, now the time is coming for the floor. We have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. So please, if anyone has any comment, please go ahead. Can we have a mic here, please? Introduce yourself and where you come from, and then tell us your point.
Hello, good morning. Thank you so much. My name is Jessica from Indonesia. With Yoko Emergency Unit, our organization focusing in DRR and CCM. My question is to Ms. Risa and Ms. Sadia. Also Ms. Maite, thank you so much for the presentation. Our project is also working with women. We have our community women leader here coming, also together partner with the Huairou Commission. And then when working with the local community, I would like to ask Ms. Risa, what are the challenges and how to ensure about the sustainability, even though it's like a community ownership, but sometimes we still need the funding. So even though our project has ended, we would like it to still continue. Do you have like some tips how to continue that sustainability? Thank you. And Ms. Sadia, like what are the challenges also working if we are talking about the culture and also social norms when working with the children or with the communities? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And now, if we have any more, yes, I see 2-3 hands in the back. We go to the lady in the back and then the two gentlemen in front. Please, my panelists here, you write down your questions so we can answer them all together. Please go ahead, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you so much. I'm called Sylvie Jacqueline Dormo. I come from Cameroon. I'm the president of the Women International League for Peace and Freedom. I want to thank the panelists for their contributions, for their brilliant presentation. I would just like to ask the question regarding the case of Iraq. Yeah, I wanted to, because if I got it very well, you mentioned the 2 rivers which are today dried. And from what you said, is it related to the crisis you're having today? And also some concrete example about the support. After the ISIS, women were affected by ISIS. First, what are some of these things? How were they really affected? And what are 1 or 2 things that you did to support them? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Then we go, yeah, can you, yes, here. Thank you, Bahia, for supporting the floor.
Hi, my name is Sam. I'm from the United States with the University of Pennsylvania. Sorry, I lost my voice.
That's okay.
My question is for Risa. You spoke very importantly about the need to highlight individual voices like women and the disabled, and also with these locally led projects. How do you have these projects remain totally locally led while also battling implicit biases within these communities and having third parties step in to ensure that these voices are heard, but these projects remain locally led?
Yes, we have here one here also, and then the last one will be here in front, back to the front row. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Joel Kelling. I'm from the Global Anglican Communion, the worldwide Anglican Church. And my question is to Mrs. Maite. It's about whether and how you are engaging in faith communities locally. We as a church globally have been engaging in a resilience program through the pandemic, trying to increase the capacity of people locally. But it's through the church, and how are we going to connect in with national governments, with regional governments? How do we expand that and hear about that more? So thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I think this is really valid. Here we have, we go here for the lady, and then we come to your doctor.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for this very interesting session. Actually, I'm not going to ask a question to
Introduce yourself.
I am Nada Abdel Mohsen, Professor of Medical Microbiology and Immunology, Sohag Faculty of Medicine, Upper Egypt. I congratulate Dr. Sadia for this very, very interesting talk. I found very similarities between your experience in Iraq, especially among Iraqi women, and our experience in Upper Egypt regarding women, especially specifically rural women from rural area. And I hope that we can share together in our experience to learn and focusing especially on juniors in different fields of education. So congratulate you and thank you, and we hope we can share our experience and share together. Thank you.
Actually, one of the good things, please, one of the good things that I always saw as a good example when we have meetings like this, when we manage to get some sort of twinning programs between cities similar in situations. And I would really invite all those who can find from the panelists that they can make this kind of twinning between a community in Somalia, or a community in Algeria, or community in Africa, somewhere else, in Seychelles or whatever, and then Iraq, and then you try to build this kind of linkages. We still have one comment questions to come. Please, doctor.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I am Dr. Adly Mohammed Mahmoud, Dean of Faculty of Agriculture, Asyut University. My question to Sadia, you said you can adapt or mitigation climate change by organic agriculture. And I think the organic agriculture need the same required as the normal agriculture, except fertilization. And I want to ask you about the smart agriculture in Iraq. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Now I see that we have a number of questions to Sadia. Some of them are even political. When we are talking about the dry rivers, you will hear now from Sadia. But I will go actually the same order as we went. So I start with Maite, and then Risa, and then Sadia at the end. Please go ahead, Maite.
Thank you very much. This was a really interesting question. Just to reflect, I think that sometimes when we approach to work with communities, I think we need to establish some kind of norms of convivence and norms of sharing, you know, as a code of conduct in some ways. But the first thing is to imagine that we are not speaking on behalf of communities. We are speaking because we work with communities. And the idea is that we can open spaces for communities to be, you know, like the ones who can be spreading out the process. And In one way, we did one exercise, and I'm going to share this because this is something that really is interesting, how local communities can be, very upgraded and very updated in information, more than local government sometimes. And this is going to be creating some kind of respect for the community leaders. We were developing a research on the women's views from the front line. Maybe you have heard about the views from the front line, but we were doing a special chapter on women's views of the front line. So we were working in 13 countries with 60 different grassroots organizations. We were training them about the Yoko framework of action in that moment. And we were approaching to the local authorities to start looking for some kind of engagement. And we discovered that none of these 60 local governments, where the local organizations were based in, knew about the Yoko framework of action. And that was something that was really creating some kind of very good energy when the grassroots organizations approach to provide information and to provide support to the governments and to say, okay, we can partner together. We are aware and we have been going through a capacity building process in the sense that we can open gates for communities to engage with the local authorities, and even if we can open spaces in the local councils of the committees. We need to be there only as facilitators. And then grassroots organizations are taking the lead and are doing everything related to advocacy. One very important tool that we use to engage local authorities and grassroots communities and to do partnering is with the community risk mapping. When they are doing this mapping and they are inviting the local authorities to do the territorial exploration with them and doing also women's safety audits. That has been something very useful because sometimes they are busy in their, the municipalities and in the local places of the local government, but do not have time to see, oh yes, here is a trail full of garbage or full of dark places that we are not aware, that girls are being raped or women has been, killed in some ways. So in the sense that we can invite local authorities, police, human rights representatives, everyone to come together to walk, to explore the community, this is something that really creates different energies in the community. And it's going to be creating a very common and integral point of view that the communities needs to be, conducted not only by the authorities. The authority needs to have voice from local organizations. That can be some of the examples I can share, but if we can speak just after the session, I will be very happy to introduce you my colleagues here from Indonesia, and they have very great examples here, and you can speak directly with one grassroots leader here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maite. Yes, Risa?
Thanks so much for the question. So I think the questions directed to me were focused on how do we ensure that these locally led and community-based initiatives are sustainable in the long term. So at the Small Grants Program, we have several mechanisms that we integrate into our programs and projects that ensure sustainability. One is ensuring that our projects are linked to local livelihoods. When the funding ends, we want to ensure that we have given the community the assistance, we have built their capacity so that they can now take initiatives on their own. So by linking activities to livelihoods, building their capacity, training them, developing new skills, we are able to ensure that the project seed funding has now been able to influence and affect other areas that can support livelihoods. Another key area is on partnerships, and I spoke about this already. Building partnerships, connecting the dots, and ensuring that community members integrated into what's happening at the local and national level is extremely important, because many times what happens at the community level is successful. We need to share these success stories at the national level and crowd in support, crowd in additional funding and finance so that we can scale these initiatives up. And that's why I chose to give you the example of the project in Seychelles. We gave them a small grant of 50,000, but because of the partnerships that we were able to build and establish, because of the success of their initiative, they were able to secure more funding and scale this up and get it mainstreamed at the national level. So that is why building the partnerships and having these government partners is so crucial at the very early stages of the project. Another important element is community ownership. Lots of times, communities just need that little bit of support, that little bit of capacity to kickstart amazing, innovative work. And that's what the Small Grant Program does. We provide this, it may be small, it's a small grant, but small grants can have huge impacts. And that has been the essence of the SGP for the last 30 years. You would not believe what a small amount of funding and community motivation can do, and how that can take the community to amazing places. And I just want to share an example from Jamaica, where we had a project where the community had no water. The women and children had to walk miles and miles and carry buckets of water on their head. And through this community-based project, we established this rainwater harvesting systems, community tanks, irrigation. And 10, 12 years on now, the community still has water. They are still able to grow their crops. Even though climate change impacts have intensified, the project has been sustainable, and it's because it's linked to livelihoods, it's because of the partnerships, it's because of that community drive and community spirit. They know something is wrong in their community, and they have the power to make that difference. And they have been able to build these strategic partnerships. And another important aspect to ensuring sustainability is creating enabling environments. Giving the community the space, the platforms to voice their concerns, to voice their concerns at a very local level. So raising the voices of youth, women, and persons with disabilities and indigenous peoples. And using this indigenous knowledge, traditions, culture, and practices to really create opportunities and avenues for innovation. And I think I'll leave it at that. Emad, thank you so much.
Thank you, Risa. We are already after 1, but I'm happy that the interest is very high here. And now, Sadia, you have to answer all these questions in less than a minute.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the first questions about the cultural behavior and the education, actually the Iraqi population suffers a lot, and a lot of their cultural norms affected by some of the religious and some of the people who control them. So we started through our education project, started to change some of the unsustainable behavior, especially starting with the kids and the teachers. And they believe in the project because they saw the impacts of climate change on their daily lives. For the crisis of the two rivers, actually, as Dr. Emad said, it's political and also climate change. As a political, because we have our Tigris and the rivers, and most of our water resources is from outside the borders. So a lot of dams built on in the side of Turkey and Iran. So the Iraqi share doesn't come as international agreements say. So they invest in the weakness and the instability of the Iraqi and political parties. So they built their dams and they didn't give the Iraqi share, as well as the drought and the high temperature rises in summer. So it's also made the impacts more severe on Iraqi population. For the ISIS on who attacks women in the rural areas, we are working with minority called Kakai groups in Iraq. They are very minority and vulnerable people who was affected by ISIS. They burned all their lands and crops. So when they returned back, they lost everything. So we started to build their capacities in another opportunities until they return back to the agriculture to improve their lands and soils and provide them with some instruments and some seeds. So they started to go to the agriculture, to return back to the agriculture, but also we trained them on how to do the sewing skills in order to be more financial sustainable inside their communities, because they lost everything. For sharing the experience, yes, of course, we can share this experience for organic agriculture, and we have very good consultants working on organic agriculture using earth norms. You know, earth norms who change the waste, organic waste, into the very good fertilizers, and we can also give you them. For the smart agriculture, actually, I'm not agricultural agronomist, I'm chemical engineer. But I can't give you more details about smart agriculture, but I am working on the organic as our consultant working on that. I have very small information about that, unfortunately. Thank you.
You still have time to discuss during the week, and you find someone from Iraq who could give the answer. But anyway, thank you very much, Saadiyya. I will give Nina the few minutes to wrap up, and then I close, and then I tell you the story about what we are putting here. You have to wait and understand why we are putting these things here.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief. First of all, thank you for sharing all the information, knowledge, and not the least the recommendations. And this is one thing I would like to stress, because I think we can agree here, but how do we get those people sitting in the negotiating room hearing and taking and making decisions that makes a change in the future? So I think one thing is teaming, but also how do we work together so we can get these messages to the negotiators? And yes, it's 4 or 5 days left of this COP, but there's another COP coming in the Emirates in 1 year time. So how do we continue together to bring these messages? And because many of us do have connections to some of the negotiators, I wanted to kind of just flag 2 things, which I think we should still remind them in the last few days. One is very much around climate finance. And we need the parties to prioritize fragile and conflict-affected regions, so local communities there also can get access to the climate funding. And also it's important to simplify the funding allocation, so it is possible without having a big administration to access it. And I think this is a big change in what might be coming on the loss and damage compared to what has been on the adaptation and mitigation. So let's continue that together. And the last one is we also need to make sure that parties and the other decision makers here increase investment in building resilience and climate change adaptation for local communities, including the displaced. So if we can jointly take these messages to those who make the decisions, we can make steps by steps to make this better. So we won't solve everything here, but let's continue collaborating for the whole climate change negotiations. Thank you, and big thank you, RAED, for having us together.
Thank you very much, Nina. Thank you. Let me tell you, this is the last example from the local-led resilience project. This is a project that we have done in Kafr Sheikh. Kafr Sheikh is northeast of the Delta. It's an area that's affected by the climate change. The salinity of the soil is getting higher. And what we have developed there, a project with the farmers through one of our civil society organizations. They are producing the quinoa, and the quinoa is giving like 30% replacement of the flour that we need to produce cookies and biscuits like you have here. What we have done, we brought the quinoa from Cairo, actually from Cairo, Kafr Sheikh to Cairo, and then from Cairo to Sharm el-Sheikh. And we have a team from the civil society organization here. Every night they cook, and we had agreement with one of the bakery here. So every night in the evening they cook what we are going to use and eat. So please try and taste. It is, as I said, 30% less flour and using the quinoa as an alternative. And it is only a project to show that how we can build adaptive measures at the local level, and at the same time it could provide income resolution and stop the displacement and keep the people stable and livelihood stable in their communities. So please, before you go, try to taste one. I will start myself. Thank you very much for joining us today, and see you in our next activities, inshallah. Thanks to NRC, thanks to Refugee International, Small Grants Program, and all who contributed from the panelists and also from the floor. Thank you very much.